The crystal walls of the Calorian High Council chamber glowed with a sick yellow light. It was the color of fear, and everyone in the room knew it. Council Prime Zalara sat in her chair made of living coral, her 4 eyes focused on the holographic display floating above the center table. Red dots marked the positions of enemy ships. There were thousands of them, spread across 7 star systems like a disease. They took Zirian 4 yesterday, reported Fleet Commander Kess, her voice barely above a whisper. 12 billion Calorians lived on that world. Now there is nothing left but empty space and floating debris. Zalara's third eye closed in pain. That was the traditional sign of mourning among her people. She had been closing eyes for months now as world after world fell to the Vortex swarm. First it was the outer colonies, then the mining stations. Now the enemy was moving toward the core systems where most of her people lived. The Vorthak were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever seen. They came from somewhere beyond the edge of known space, traveling in ships that looked alive because they were alive. The bioships could change their shape and grow new weapons during battle. They consumed entire planets, breaking them down into raw materials to build more ships and feed their endless hunger. "What about the Zephyrian Alliance?" asked Archivist Then, his old voice shaking. "Have they responded to our calls for help?" Commander Kess shook her head. The Zephyrians pulled back to defend their own worlds. The Altarian Republic did the same. Everyone is running scared. No one wants to fight an enemy that adapts to every weapon we use against them. That was the terrible truth about the Vorthak. Their bioships learned from every battle. Fire energy weapons at them and they would grow new armor that absorbed energy, use kinetic missiles, and they would develop point defense systems that could stop anything moving below light speed. Every time someone tried to fight them, the Vorthak became stronger. Zalara looked around the council chamber at the faces of her advisors. These were some of the smartest beings in Calorian space, and they all looked defeated. In the past 6 months, they had lost 12 star systems and over 40 billion people. Their remaining fleets were down to less than 300 ships, most of them damaged from previous battles. "There must be something," Zalara said, though she did not believe her own words. "Some weapon we have not tried. Some ally we have not contacted." Archivist Then was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in a voice so low that everyone had to lean forward to hear him. "There is one possibility, but it is dangerous. Perhaps more dangerous than the Vorthak themselves." All eyes turned to the old archivist. Then had access to the deepest archives of Calorian knowledge, including records that were thousands of years old. If anyone knew of a secret weapon or hidden ally, it would be him. "Speak," Zalara commanded. Then activated his personal data pad and projected a star chart above the table. It showed a small section of the galaxy that most civilized species avoided. The area was marked with warning symbols and danger signs in a dozen different languages. "Sector 7G, Then said. "The quarantine zone. There is a species there called humans. They come from a world that should not be able to support intelligent life. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme weather, and deadly predators everywhere. The few contact reports we have classify them as Deathworlders." Several council members made sounds of disgust. Deathworlders were considered abominations by most galactic civilizations. They were beings so violent and unpredictable that they were banned from joining any major alliance or trade group. Most species tried to pretend they did not exist. "These humans," Then continued, "are described as extremely aggressive. They fight wars against each other for reasons that make no sense to civilized minds. They have weapons designed specifically to kill other humans. Their entire culture seems built around conflict and violence." "You want us to invite monsters into our space?" asked Commander Kess, her voice filled with horror. "I want us to survive," Then replied. "The few intelligence reports we have on humans suggest they are very good at war. They have been fighting each other for thousands of years. Every advance in their technology has been used first as a weapon. They might be the only species in the galaxy that could face the Vorthak and not be afraid." Zalara stared at the star chart, thinking about what Then was suggesting. Contact with Deathworlders was forbidden by the Galactic Accords. If the other civilizations found out that the Calorians had asked humans for help, they might be cast out of galactic society forever. But what was the alternative? In 5 days, maybe 6, the Vorthak would reach Caloris Prime. The capital world held 8 billion Calorians. If it fell, their entire civilization would be extinct within a month. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" Zalara asked. Then scrolled through his data. "Very little. They use primitive weapons compared to our technology. Kinetic, projectiles, chemical explosives, nuclear fission. But the few times they have been observed in combat, they showed unusual tactical thinking. They do not fight the way other species fight. They are unpredictable. Unpredictable might be what we need, Solara said quietly. The Vorthak have adapted to conventional tactics. They know how civilized species wage war, but they have never faced Deathworlders. The debate went on for hours. Some council members argued that asking humans for help would be worse than losing to the Vorthak. Others pointed out that they were going to lose anyway, so they had nothing left to risk. In the end, the vote was close. 7 members voted to contact the humans. 5 voted against. 3 abstained, too frightened to make a choice either way. It was barely enough, but it was a decision. Solara ordered the communications team to prepare a quantum fold transmission. The message would take 12 hours to reach human space, traveling faster than the light through folded dimensions. If the humans decided to help, it would take their ships at least 3 days to reach Calorian territory. That left very little time if they were coming at all. As the transmission beam powered up, Solara wondered if she was about to make the greatest mistake in Calorian history. The humans might ignore their call completely, or worse, they might come and prove to be as terrible as everyone said Deathworlders were. But as she watched the red dots on the tactical display move closer to her homeworld, she decided that any chance was better than no chance at all. The message was simple and desperate. It identified the Calorians as a peaceful species facing extinction. It described the Vorthak threat and asked for military assistance. It offered to share technology and establish trade relations in exchange for help. What the message did not say was that the Calorians had no idea what they were asking for. They had never seen humans fight. They did not understand what it meant to be a species that had turned warfare into an art form over thousands of years of constant conflict. They were about to learn. The transmission launched into hyperspace, carrying their desperate plea across thousands of light years to a species that most of the galaxy preferred to pretend did not exist. In the deep archives of human space, automated systems would receive the message and forward it to military commanders who had been waiting their entire careers for something like this. Solara did not know it yet, but she had just given humanity exactly what it had always wanted: a righteous war against an enemy that deserved to be destroyed. The humans were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. Admiral Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee when the impossible happened. The communications officer on duty aboard the Terran Defense Fleet flagship turned to her with wide eyes and a confused expression. "Ma'am, you need to hear this," Lieutenant Torres said, her voice cracking slightly. "We just received a transmission from, well, we're not sure where it came from. But it's not human." Chen set down her coffee cup and walked over to the communications station. The bridge of the TDF Indomitable was always busy, but now every crew member was staring at the main display screen. Numbers and symbols scrolled past in patterns that made no sense to human eyes. "Play it back," Chen ordered. The message began with a series of mathematical concepts: prime numbers, basic physics equations, and universal constants. Then the real content started. The translation software worked frantically to convert alien concepts into words that humans could understand. "We are the Calorian Republic," the message began. "We are a peaceful species of 12 star systems facing complete extinction. An enemy called the Vorthak Swarm has consumed 7 of our worlds and is advancing on our capital. They adapt to all conventional weapons and tactics. We have 5 days before they reach our core systems. Please help us. We can offer technology and trade agreements in exchange for military assistance." Chen listened to the message 3 times before she fully understood what she was hearing. This was first contact with an alien species. Real aliens, not the bacteria and simple organisms that human scientists had found on other worlds. These were intelligent beings with technology, civilization, and right now, a very big problem. "Is this real?" she asked Torres. "All the math checks out, Admiral. The quantum encryption is way beyond anything we could fake. The signal came from deep space, about 3,000 light-years past the edge of our survey maps. Whoever sent this has technology we've never seen before." Chen walked back to her command chair and sat down heavily. First contact was supposed to happen very differently. There were protocols, procedures, and carefully planned meetings with lots of scientists and diplomats. It was not supposed to be a desperate cry for help against something called the Vorthak Swarm. But as she thought about it, Chen realized this might actually be the best possible way for humanity to meet the galaxy. Humans were very good at war. They had been fighting each other for their entire recorded history, developing better and better ways to destroy things. Every major human advance in technology had started as a weapon first, and been adapted for peaceful use later. "Get me Admiral Reeves and Admiral Kusanagi on secure channels," Chen ordered, "and patch me through to Fleet Command on Earth." Within an hour, the highest levels of human military command were in emergency session. The debate was short and intense. Some officers wanted to study the message for months before taking any action. Others worried that this might be a trap, or some kind of test. But Admiral Chen had reviewed the tactical data, and her conclusion was simple. 12 billion intelligent beings were about to be exterminated by something that sounded like a galactic-level threat. If the Vorthak could consume entire civilizations, they would eventually find Earth too. Better to fight them now while humanity had allies, than wait for them to arrive at human space. "This is what we've been preparing for," Chen told the assembled admirals. "Every war game, every training exercise, every new ship design has been built around the idea that someday we would face an enemy that wanted to wipe us out completely. Well, here it is." Fleet Admiral Morrison, speaking from Earth, was concerned about logistics. "Sarah, you're talking about sending our ships 3,000 light-years into completely unknown space to fight an enemy we know nothing about. We don't even know if our weapons will work against these bioships." "Then we find out," Chen replied. "Sir, we have 47 ships in the 13th Fleet, all combat-ready and equipped with our latest weapons. Admiral Kusanagi has another, 32 ships finishing up the pirate sweep near Centauri. That's nearly 80 ships total. If we move fast, we can reach Calorian space in 3 days." "Against how many enemy ships?" Morrison asked. Chen looked at the tactical estimates her staff had prepared. "Unknown, but probably thousands, maybe tens of thousands." The silence on the channel was long and uncomfortable. Finally, Morrison spoke. Again. "Admiral, you're talking about taking 80 ships against overwhelming odds to help aliens we've never met fight an enemy we don't understand. The casualty estimates would be horrible." "Yes, sir," Chen agreed. "But consider the alternative. If we let the Calorians die, we lose our first chance to make contact with galactic civilization. If the Vorthak are as dangerous as they sound, they'll keep expanding until they reach human space. And sir, with respect, this is exactly the kind of fight that humans are built for." That last point carried weight with the assembled officers. Humanity had never been known for backing down from a fight, especially when the odds were bad. Every major victory in human history had come from situations where reasonable people would have surrendered or run away. The decision was made surprisingly quickly. Within 6 hours of receiving the alien message, the Terran Defense Fleet was mobilizing for humanity's first interstellar war. The 13th and 8th Fleets would jump to the coordinates provided by the Calorians. Additional ships from the Home Defense Force would follow if needed. Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and looked out at the fleet assembling in space around Earth. 79 ships ranging from fast destroyers to massive dreadnoughts. Each one carried hundreds of human crew members who had volunteered to travel 3,000 light-years to fight for people they had never met. "Ma'am," Torres said from her communication station, "should we send a reply to the Calorians?" Chen thought about what to say to aliens who were facing extinction. How do you explain to a peaceful species that help is coming in the form of Deathworlders? How do you tell them that humanity has been preparing for this fight since they first picked up sticks and stones? "Tell them help is on the way," Chen said finally. "Tell them we'll be there in 3 days. And Torres? Tell them not to worry. Humans are very good at this." The message that went back to Calorian space was short and simple. It confirmed that the humans had received the distress call and were dispatching military assistance. It gave an estimated arrival time and requested detailed information about the enemy. What the message did not mention was that humanity was absolutely thrilled to finally have a reason to use all the weapons they had been building. For the first time in centuries, humans would be fighting for something bigger than territory or resources or politics. They would be fighting to save an entire species from extinction. It was exactly the kind of war that humans were born to fight. The fleet jumped to hyperspace 3 hours later, their ships disappearing in flashes of twisted light as they began the journey to Calorian territory. Behind them, Earth's defense networks powered up and additional fleets began mobilizing, just in case the Vorthak proved to be more dangerous than anyone expected. Chen settled into her command chair for the long journey ahead, already planning the battle to come. The Calorians had said the enemy adapted to conventional tactics. Well, humans had never been accused of being conventional. The Vorthak were about to learn what happened when you threatened a species under human protection. Council Prime Zalara felt a mixture of hope and terror as the sensor readings came in. The human ships were arriving at the edge of Calorian space, and they looked nothing like what she had expected. 79 vessels confirmed, reported Fleet Commander Kess, her voice tight with confusion. But Admiral, these ships, they're primitive. Metal hulls, chemical propulsion, what appear to be kinetic weapons. How can they possibly help us against the Vorthak? Zalara stared at the tactical display showing the approaching human fleet. The ships were massive, much larger than most Calorian vessels, but they looked crude and brutal. Where Calorian ships were elegant curves of living crystal, the human vessels were all angles and armor plating. They looked less like exploration ships and more like weapons designed specifically for war. The energy readings don't match the technology level, Kess continued. These ships are putting out power signatures that rival our best dreadnoughts. But they're using what looks like primitive fusion reactors. It makes no sense. Before Zalara could respond, a communication request came through on standard galactic frequencies. The translation matrix worked quickly, and soon the council chamber was filled with the image of a human female wearing what appeared to be military clothing. This was Zalara's first look at a Deathworlder, and it was exactly as terrifying as she had feared. Admiral Chen looked like she had been carved from stone and tempered in fire. Her face bore small scars that spoke of violence survived. Her eyes were cold and focused in a way that made Zalara's feeding tendrils curl with instinctive fear. Behind the human, the bridge of her ship buzzed with activity. Other humans moved with quick, efficient motions that reminded Zalara of pack predators she had seen in nature documentaries. Every movement seemed calculated and purposeful, as if these beings were constantly preparing for combat. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet," the human said, her voice carrying an undertone of controlled aggression that made several council members visibly flinch. "We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible. I need a full tactical briefing on the enemy forces, their capabilities, and their current position." Zalara tried to compose herself and speak in the formal manner appropriate for addressing a foreign military commander. "Admiral Chen, we are grateful beyond words for your response. The Vorthak swarm currently occupies 7 of our star systems and is advancing toward our core worlds. They will reach Caloris Prime in approximately 5 standard days." 5 days, Chen repeated, and Zalara saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. "That doesn't give us much time to prepare a defensive strategy." "Admiral, with respect, you do not understand the nature of our enemy," Zalara said desperately. "The Vorthak are not like other opponents. Their bioships adapt to any attack method. After only a few engagements, our most advanced energy weapons became useless within hours. Their ships learn from every battle and evolve countermeasures." Chen was quiet for a moment, and Zalara saw her exchanging looks with other humans on her bridge. Then the human admiral smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Zalara had ever seen on any living being. It was not the smile of someone who was happy. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you've never fought humans before," Chen said. "We've been dealing with things that adapt to us since before we learned to make fire. Evolution is just another enemy tactic to overcome." Zalara felt her fourth eye close in confusion. "I do not understand. On Earth, our home world, almost everything is trying to kill us," Chen explained, her tone becoming almost educational. "Diseases that adapt to our medicines, predators that learn to hunt us, weather patterns that change faster than we can predict, even other humans who constantly develop new ways to fight. Adaptation isn't special to us, Admiral. It's just Tuesday." Before Zalara could respond, another human on Chen's bridge spoke up. "Admiral, sensors are picking up massive hyperspace disturbances 3 light-years out. The Vorthak advance force is bigger than the Calorians estimated. We're reading at least 12,000 bioships." Chen nodded as if she had expected this news. "Time to intercept? 18 hours if they maintain current speed." "Good. That gives us time to deploy properly." Chen turned back to face Zalara. "I need complete files on Vorthak ship types, weapons, defensive capabilities, and tactical patterns. Everything you have. My staff will analyze it and develop appropriate countermeasures." Zalara's second eye closed in distress. "Admiral Chen, I do not think you understand. We have been fighting the Vorthak for 8 months. Every strategy we tried failed. Every weapon we used became ineffective after a few battles. They are not an enemy that can be defeated by conventional means." "Who said anything about conventional means?" Chen asked, her smile returning. "Admiral, Humans have been fighting unconventional wars since we figured out how to throw rocks. The Vorthak may be excellent at adapting to known tactics, but they've never faced a species that considers adaptation to be just another challenge to overcome. The transmission shifted to show a tactical display of the human fleet. The 79 ships were already moving into formations that made no sense to Calorian military doctrine. They scattered across a huge volume of space, some ships accelerating toward the Vorthak advance, others falling back toward defensive positions around Calorian worlds. "Your ships are spreading out," Kess observed with concern. "You're dividing your forces. That violates every principle of fleet engagement." Chen's laugh was genuinely amused. "Commander, we're not planning a fleet engagement. We're planning to teach the Vorthak why humans became the dominant species on a planet where everything wanted to eat us." The communication ended abruptly, leaving the Calorian Council staring at an empty hologram. Outside the chamber's crystal windows, they could see human ships moving through their space with purpose and confidence that seemed completely at odds with the overwhelming odds they faced. "What have we done?" whispered Archivist then. Zilara did not have an answer. She had asked for help from Deathworlders, and help had arrived in the form of 79 ships crewed by beings who looked at 12,000 enemy vessels as merely an interesting challenge. Part of her wondered if the humans were insane. The rest of her was beginning to hope that insanity was exactly what they needed. On the tactical display, the Vorthak bioships continued their advance toward Caloris Prime, confident in their overwhelming numbers and adaptive capabilities. They had consumed entire civilizations using the same tactics, learning from each engagement and becoming stronger. But they had never faced humans before. In 18 hours, both sides would learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. The Vorthak believed they were facing another conventional fleet that would follow predictable patterns. They were about to discover that humans had never been accused of being predictable. The first battle between humans and the Vorthak swarm took place in the Zerion system, 18 light-years from Caloris Prime. Admiral Kusanagi had positioned her fleet behind the system's asteroid belt, using the space rocks to hide her ships from the approaching enemy scouts. 12 bioships dropped out of hyperspace, each one the size of a small moon. The Vorthak scouts were expecting to find another empty system or maybe a few frightened Calorian defenders. Instead, they found 32 human warships waiting in ambush formation. Aboard the command ship Akira, Kusanagi watched the tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had spent decades studying the art of war. The Vorthak ships were impressive, she had to admit. Their organic hulls shifted and flowed like living things, already beginning to adapt to the energy signatures her fleet was putting out. "Adaptive bioarmor confirmed," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Park. "The enemy ships are analyzing our reactor outputs and weapon systems. They're growing new hull configurations in real time." Kusanagi nodded. The Calorians had warned them this would happen. The Vorthak bioships could change their entire structure based on what they learned from each battle. Fire energy weapons at them, and they would develop energy-resistant armor. Use missiles, and they would grow point defense systems. It was an impressive capability. Unfortunately for the Vorthak, they were about to learn that humans had been dealing with adaptive enemies for their entire evolutionary history. "All ships, prepare for Pattern 7 engagement," Kusanagi ordered calmly. Her fleet scattered in what looked like random directions, breaking every rule of conventional space combat. The Vorthak bioships moved to pursue, their organic brains, confident that they could handle whatever primitive weapons these unknown aliens might use. They had studied months of Calorian combat footage. They knew how civilized species fought wars: energy weapons, guided missiles, defensive screens, and predictable formations. The bioships had adapted to counter all of these tactics. What they had not adapted to was humanity's approach to warfare. "Firing. Solution acquired on target Alpha," announced the weapons officer. "Fire," Kusanagi said quietly. The human fleet did not use energy weapons or guided missiles. Instead, they fired something much simpler and much more deadly. Chunks of metal accelerated to 20% of light speed using magnetic launchers, nuclear warheads that produced heat and radiation too intense for any biological system to survive. Kinetic penetrators that hit with the force of small asteroids. The Vorthak ships tried desperately to adapt. Their bio-armor shifted configurations, growing new defensive structures and energy-absorbing layers. But how do you adapt to a piece of tungsten moving at 60,000 kilometers per second? How do you evolve resistance to nuclear fire that burns at 50 million degrees? The laws of physics do not care about adaptation. Matter cannot survive being hit by other matter at relativistic speeds. Biological systems cannot function when every atom in their structure is being bombarded by high-energy radiation. 7 of the 12 Vorthak scout ships died in the first 30 seconds of combat. Their bioarmor simply vaporized under impacts that released more energy than small stars. The remaining 5 ships began retreating immediately, their adaptive systems completely confused by weapons they could not analyze or counter. Pursuit. Course, Kusanagi ordered. Do not let them escape. I want them destroyed before they can report back to their main fleet. The human ships chased the fleeing Vorthak vessels across the system, their superior acceleration allowing them to close the distance quickly. The bioships tried every defensive measure they had learned from fighting the Calorians, but nothing worked against weapons that relied on basic physics rather than exotic energy patterns. The last Vorthak scout died 12 minutes later, its bio-hull torn apart by a railgun slug that hit with enough force to crack small moons. All targets destroyed, reported the tactical officer. No enemy survivors detected. Kusanagi allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The battle had gone exactly as planned, but this was just the opening move in a much larger war. The real test would come when they faced the main Vorthak fleet, which intelligence estimated at over 2 million ships. She opened a secure channel to Admiral Chen aboard the Indomitable. Sarah, Phase 1 is complete. The advanced scouts have been eliminated. The enemy will not receive any intelligence about our capabilities. Chen's voice came back across the quantum communication link. Excellent work, Keiko. How did your people perform? Better than expected. The Vorthak adaptive systems are impressive, but they're designed to counter conventional weapons and tactics. They have no response protocol for kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. That's what we were hoping for, Chen replied. Any casualties on your end? None. The enemy never got close enough to return effective fire. Admiral, these bioships might be dangerous to species that fight conventional wars, but they're not prepared for human methods. There was a pause on the channel, and Kusanagi could hear the sounds of frantic activity in the background. The main human fleet was preparing for the much larger battle to come. Keiko, I need you to fall back to rally point 7, Chen said, finally. The main Vorthak fleet just entered sensor range. We're reading over 2 million bioships, including some that are larger than anything we've seen before. This is going to be the real test. Kusanagi looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. It was a massive cloud of organic ships that stretched across several light-years of space. Each individual ship was dangerous enough, but together they represented a force that could consume entire star systems. Any reasonable military commander would look at those odds and order an immediate retreat. 2 million ships against 79 was not a battle. It was suicide. But Kusanagi was human, and humans had never been accused of being reasonable. Understood, Admiral. My fleet will be in position in 6 hours, and Sarah, the crew is looking forward to this fight. Chen's laugh came across the channel, and it was the sound of someone who genuinely enjoyed her work. That's what I like to hear. See you on the other side, Keiko. As her ships formed up for the jump to rally point 7, Kusanagi thought about what they were facing. The Vorthak had consumed dozens of civilizations using overwhelming numbers and adaptive tactics. They had learned to counter every weapon and every strategy used by the major galactic powers, but they had never faced humans before. They had never fought a species that had learned to wage war on a planet where survival required constant innovation and unconventional thinking. The bioships were about to receive an education in human military doctrine. And the first lesson was simple. When fighting humans, never assume you know what they are going to do next. The main battle was still hours away, but Kusanagi was already planning the next phase of humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. The Vorthak thought they were facing another conventional fleet that would follow predictable patterns. They were about to learn that humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of doing the unexpected. The main Vorthak fleet arrived at Caloris Prime like a living nightmare made of starships and hunger. Over 2 million biovessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent weapons and adaptive armor systems. The fleet stretched across millions of kilometers of space, blotting out entire sections of stars. From the surface of Caloris Prime, Council Prime Zalara watched through the crystal windows of the emergency bunker as the enemy took position around her world. Each bioship was a masterpiece of evolved warfare, grown from the remains of conquered civilizations and adapted through dozens of successful campaigns. The human fleet looked pathetically small by comparison. 79 ships against 2 million was not a battle. It was not even a meaningful gesture. It was simply the quick death of brave aliens who had tried to help. "The human fleet is moving to intercept," reported Fleet Commander Kess, her voice hollow with despair. "Admiral Chen has requested that all civilian populations move to underground shelters." Zalara closed her third eye in grief. The humans had traveled 3,000 light-years to help her people, and now they were going to die because she had been too desperate to consider the mathematical impossibility of what she was asking. Then, something impossible happened. "Admiral Chen to all Calorian forces," came the broadcast on every frequency. "Stand by for Phase 2 deployment." Space itself seemed to tear open near the edge of the system. A massive rift appeared, crackling with energy that made every sensor on the planet scream warnings. Through the artificial wormhole came more ships. Many more ships. The first fleet emerged first, followed by the second, then the third. Massive. Dreadnoughts, fast cruisers, carrier ships loaded with fighter craft and support vessels carrying supplies for extended combat. By the time the portal closed, over 1,500 human ships had taken position in Calorian space. "How?" whispered Kess, staring at the tactical display. "How did they move so many ships without us detecting them?" The answer came from Admiral Chen herself, her voice broadcast to every human ship and every Calorian receiver. "All human forces, this is Admiral Chen. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species that chooses cooperation over consumption, creation over destruction. The enemy has shown us what they are. Now we show them what we are." Even with reinforcements, the humans were still outnumbered more than 1,000 to 1. But something about their formation and movement patterns suggested they were not planning a conventional battle. The Vorthak fleet began its attack as soon as all ships were in position. 2 million biovessels moved forward in waves, their adaptive hulls already configured to resist the kinetic weapons and nuclear warheads that had destroyed their scouts. The hive mind controlling the fleet was confident. These humans had shown their capabilities in the earlier engagement, and evolution would triumph over primitive weapons. Admiral Chen watched the approaching enemy from the bridge of the Indomitable, her expression calm despite the overwhelming odds. Around her, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing weapons and defensive systems for the battle of their lives. "Deploy the World Breaker," she ordered quietly. From the largest human carrier emerged something that should not have existed. The device was the size of a small moon, its construction representing decades of human engineering and scientific advancement. It looked like a combination of ship, space station, and industrial facility all fused together into one impossible creation. The Vorthak bioships paused in their advance, their sensors unable to process what they were detecting. The energy readings from the human device were unlike anything in their databases. It was not a weapon in any conventional sense. It was something else entirely.
"This is Admiral Chen to all Vorthak forces," came the broadcast across every communication frequency. "You have 60 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from this system. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why humanity does not negotiate
with genocide." The response from the Vorthak was predictable. The bioships resumed their attack, launching millions of organic projectiles and energy bursts designed to overwhelm any defense. Their adapted hulls were ready for kinetic weapons and nuclear fire. They had learned from the previous battle and evolved appropriate countermeasures. What they had not learned to counter was having their local star turned into a weapon. The Worldbreaker's primary system was not designed to destroy ships directly. It was a stellar engineering platform, capable of manipulating the fundamental forces that powered stars. The device fired a focused beam of exotic particles at Caloris Prime's sun, destabilizing the fusion reactions in its core. The star began to flare. Solar flares were natural phenomena that occurred when magnetic fields on a star's surface became tangled and released enormous amounts of energy. What the humans had built was a way to create artificial flares on command, turning any star into a weapon system with unlimited range and power. The electromagnetic pulse from the induced solar flare swept across the entire system at light speed, followed by a wave of high-energy radiation that was hot enough to sterilize planets. The Vorthak bioships, with their organic components and electrical systems, were particularly vulnerable to this kind of attack. Their adaptive armor could evolve to resist kinetic impacts and energy weapons, but it could not adapt fast enough to survive the fury of an artificially destabilized star. The radiation cooked the bioships from the inside out, disrupting their biological systems faster than they could regenerate or adapt. In 17 minutes, 2 million Vorthak vessels were reduced to drifting organic debris. The few bioships, at the edge of the formation that survived the initial pulse, tried desperately to escape to hyperspace, but the human fleet was ready for them. Kusanagi's ships had positioned themselves along the most likely escape routes, and they destroyed the survivors with conventional weapons before they could jump away. From her bunker on Caloris Prime, Zalara watched the tactical display in stunned silence. The massive Vorthak fleet that had seemed unstoppable was simply gone, vaporized by weapons that turned stars into artillery pieces. The humans had not just won the battle. They had demonstrated a level of technological capability that bordered on godlike power. Council Prime, Kess said softly. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen. The hologram that appeared showed the human commander standing on her bridge, looking no different than she had before the battle. There was no triumphant expression, no sign of the incredible victory she had just achieved. She looked like someone who had simply finished a routine task. Council Prime Zalara, Chen said, the immediate threat to your system has been eliminated. We're tracking several Vorthak vessels that escaped to hyperspace, but they appear to be in full retreat. My fleet will remain in your space for the next few days to ensure no additional enemy forces approach. Zalara struggled to find words appropriate for what the humans had just done. They had saved her entire civilization, destroyed an enemy that had seemed invincible, and demonstrated weapons technology that exceeded anything she had imagined possible. Admiral Chen, she finally managed, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You have saved not just our species but potentially every civilized world in this region of the galaxy. Chen's expression softened slightly. Ma'am, with respect, that's what allies do for each other. The Vorthak represented a threat to everyone who believes in cooperation instead of consumption. Stopping them was not just about saving the Calorians. It was about protecting the kind of galaxy we want to live in. Over the following hours, as human ships spread throughout Calorian space to establish defensive positions, Zalara began to understand what had really happened. The humans had not just won a battle. They had introduced themselves to galactic civilization in the most dramatic way possible, demonstrating that they were not the primitive Deathworlders that most species believed them to be. They were something much more dangerous and much more valuable. They were the kind of allies who would travel 3,000 light-years to fight for people they had never met, using weapons that could destabilize stars to protect civilizations they barely knew. Within days, news of the battle spread throughout known space. The Vorthak swarm, which had consumed dozens of worlds and seemed unstoppable, had been completely destroyed by a human fleet using weapons that seemed like magic to most galactic species. More importantly, the humans had made it clear that they were willing to share their protection with anyone who asked for help against existential threats. The Terran Defense Pact was officially established within a month, with 17 species requesting membership and more applications arriving daily. The galaxy had learned two important lessons. First, that humanity possessed weapons technology advanced enough to turn stars into artillery. Second, and perhaps more importantly, they were willing to use that technology to protect innocent life against genocidal threats. The Vorthak had thought they were facing another conventional fleet using predictable tactics. Instead, they had encountered a species that considered warfare an art form and had spent thousands of years perfecting techniques for winning impossible battles. The few Vorthak survivors that made it back to their home territories carried a simple message.